Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. On today's Cinemophile, we're going to be talking about the documentary film Spacewoman. It is about astronaut Eileen Collins, who was the first woman to pilot and command an American spacecraft, born on the other side of the tracks in upstate New York. Eileen smashed through many glass ceilings in the U.S. Air Force and at NASA in her illustrious career, culminating in 4 increasingly dramatic and dangerous space shuttle missions. Again, the film is called Spacewoman. We're joined today by the director, and that would be Hannah Berryman, as well as the subject of the film, former astronaut Eileen Collins. To both of you, welcome to Cinemophile.
Hello, thanks for having us. I'm Hannah.
Yeah, and this is Eileen. And hi, Mike. Thanks for having us on board today.
Well, and thank you both for being here. Terrific documentary film. For those of you who weren't aware, maybe you know about Sally Ride, but Commander Eileen Collins was instrumental in the success of the space program, not only as a U.S. Air Force pilot, but also when she took command of, as I said in the introduction, 4 different space shuttle missions. Came along at a time when the program itself was in trouble based on what had happened just previous to her command of the space shuttle. Although we'll get into some of that in our conversation, but I want to also begin by thanking you for your service, Commander Collins. Hannah Berryman, what was it about Commander Collins's life story that caught your attention? What was it that inspired the making of Spacewoman?
So the producer, Keith Haviland, has made other space films. And when Eileen wrote her book about her life with Jonathan Ward, he immediately read it and thought it would make a great film and went to Eileen. And she took a bit of persuading, I think, because she isn't a person who's tended to kind of put herself forward in that way. And then I think she decided she'd do it. And he joined up with another good producer called Natasha Dack. And they approached me about doing the film. And I read Eileen's book. And I thought it was an amazing story because he was the first woman to do all the kind of right stuff, Top Gun piloting of shuttle and also command it. And not only that, she was part of these really quite jeopardous missions, like Return to Flight after Columbia. And also she wasn't from a background that I'd expected. You know, she was from a kind of quite a tough background. And I wanted to see how that fed into being able to kind of, I guess, conquer fear and do the kind of things she did in space. She also had her own family, so I kind of knew we could do that journey as well. And all in all, it felt like there were a lot of aspects that we could cover.
Well, Commander Eileen Collins, when you were approached by Hannah and her team, what was your reaction? What were you thinking this could be? Or
Well, yeah, I'm normally not the kind of person that wants to promote myself. In fact, it took me well over 10 years to write the book about my career. And the only reason I wrote the book was we had the pandemic hit in the year 2020, and I ran out of things to do because all my travel was canceled. So I wrote the book, as Hannah mentioned. I wrote the book with Jonathan Ward, and the book came out at the end of 2021. And that is when I was contacted by the film team, which, I was kind of negative on it at first because, it is a little intimidating to have your life up there on the screen. That's not my normal career progress. I'm used to flying airplanes and going up into space and, being mission focused in that way. And going into the film industry, especially having my family's life up there, I kind of had to get used to the idea before I said yes. And so it took, many months of thinking about it in my own mind and talking to my family, my brother and sister, mostly my husband and my 2 kids. And everyone, they were all excited about doing it. They're like, yeah, we'd be happy to support, to interview. So I eventually said yes, and we started filming, I think, in the fall of 2023. And, I watched Hannah go through her journey with the producers and the whole film team, the cameramen, and I could just go on with what a great team it was to work with. And I really, now that I've branched out into the film industry, I find it really exciting and maybe the next steps that I take in my life is now going around and promoting the film Spacewoman and finding it's actually quite satisfying to see people come up to me after the film and they love it. The audiences that have seen it so far have, really came back with glowing, I would say, feelings that they had. And you can even read the reviews online, which are overwhelmingly positive. And it just gives me, and I'm sure Hannah, a good feeling of satisfaction that we were able to make a product that touches people so much.
Yeah, and because it's come up a couple of times in your answer and as well as Hannah's answer about your background, about your family. And in terms of just sharing that with us, it gives us a context for your life, obviously, and also a sense of you in your determination to achieve what you set out for yourself. And so I wonder what the film would be like if it had just strictly been you as commander of the space shuttle. But I'm thankful that you were comfortable and willing to share your background, because this is one of the things that, in my opinion, humanizes you as a person, because many people, many of us have gone through similar backgrounds and struggled to overcome some of those issues that we see in the film, some of the things that happened to you and to your family. So I really, my hat's off to you for being willing to do that. And I'm sure it was a difficult journey in some ways for you, but I think the film is better for it. And I think for a lot of people who watch the film, they're going to react to it in a much more on an emotional level in watching this film.
Yeah, I think it'll help people understand the life of an astronaut. And, one of the things I've been trying to do since, during and after my retirement as an astronaut is take the message of space exploration to people around the country. And instead of just, talking within our own space industry, getting out there and really truly sharing the message. And you find, and Hannah really locked onto this, you find that you can bring people into the space, I want to say, interest in space by showing the human side of it and showing that astronauts and their families we're regular people, we're humans. We happen to find ourselves, after trying to reach for our dreams as astronauts, we find that we were selected to become astronauts. And I think there's a little bit of responsibility there, being a NASA astronaut representing the United States. And then we have international astronauts representing their countries, that we take that message back, I want to say around the world. And why are we exploring space? Why is it so important? And I think having a film like Spacewoman that doesn't just say the ABCs of we flew this mission and this happened, we flew this next mission and that happened, that's all important. But by bringing in the family side and the music is just incredibly good. Bringing that in the way our editor edited the music into the story, into the scenes, it is really, it really brings out, I want to say, different kinds of emotions in the viewer, excitement, maybe some sadness, maybe some laughing, some comedy, some happiness. So it's Spacewoman kind of brings out emotions across the spectrum. Yeah, it was really brilliantly done. I didn't make it. Hannah and her team made it, and I was really incredibly happy with the product.
Well, Hannah, this is such a terrific story, the story of Eileen Collins, in the sense of, and we see it in the film, and I do want to ask you, Eileen, as well, but in the film it comes across as, I wouldn't say you knew what your life's journey would be at an early age, but you knew you loved to fly. You knew you loved certain things that challenged you, and that's the thing that comes across. And I guess I will ask you, Eileen, in terms of that drive, understanding what it was that motivated you or gave you happiness and fulfillment was what, in terms of how it relates to what you became? Was the flying? Was it the challenge of it? What were the things that sort of informed you as you were moving through your life?
Yeah, well, it begins with my mom taking us 4 kids to the library. And it was something we did on Saturdays. I would come home with a stack of books. I remember as a little kid, I'd come home with books on horses and dogs and bugs and all kinds of interesting science and, biology and different, just learning and curiosity. But I also think as a kid, I was an explorer. In my neighborhood, which was, government housing in Elmira, New York, we were actually along the edge of town. And And myself and my siblings and our neighbors would explore the forest and the creek, and we'd be climbing trees. And back in the days when your parents had no idea where you were, I'd get on my bike and ride around the city, just, zipping down hills as fast as I could. I'm surprised I didn't kill myself, but I was kind of a explorer. And I think in that regard, my mother sent us to summer camp because she had to work and she had to send us somewhere in the summer. So all of those things I think brought out my nature as an explorer. Any other respect, I was just a normal kid. I wasn't good at sports, but I mentioned books earlier. When I found the section in the library on flying, books on airplanes, books on pilots, men and women, military and civilian pilots, fiction and nonfiction, I really got into reading books, and I think that was what put me over the decision of maybe I can do this myself someday. And it kind of goes from there. And one last thing I'll say is the timing for me was such that when I graduated from college was the same time that the Air Force was bringing women into military pilot training for the first time. So that just coincidentally, the year I was born happened to line up with my age being associated with bringing women into military flying. So I was one of the first classes to go through flight training with women pilots. And of course, that's part of the story also.
Well, Hannah, just to follow up on some part of that aspect, Commander Collins came along, as you were saying, at the right time to be able to enlist in this program or get to be a part of the program. But also, what I didn't know until I saw the film was she's commanding the first space shuttle after Columbia.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things. Again, this is just a sort of the fate of the gods, if you will. There are a lot of things in her career that lined up in such a way as to enhance the sort of the compelling nature of the story. Let's talk a little bit about that.
I mean, you're right about that. And I guess also when I make a doc like this, it's like I'm completely plotting it. It's you're plotting it as you would a narrative feature. It's just that you're plotting it with a real story and the real people, but you're still working out when you're going to use different things. So I kind of read Eileen's book and I just thought there was something about that return to flight mission and how she literally turned it around that I thought was the kind of crux of where everything's going to happen and everything's going to play out on an emotional level too, with her family. I thought that's when it's all going to something about being in space for that return to flight mission when they encountered their own problems and then had to resolve them. And so that's what I tried to do, was sort of building to that point in the kind of emotional family story as well as the mission story.
In terms of getting the footage, obviously there's a lot of footage of going through these episodes in her life. Just a little bit for filmmakers who are maybe listening to the program. What are the steps? What do you do, or what went into finding? Because there's some great footage of her in training and also just her life basically. So let's talk a little bit about putting that part together as well.
That's always the films I do they're quite archive heavy. So always I'm thinking straight away, what could be the archive? And in some ways you're led on the instance you cover by the archive, actually. So there's things we were looking for. Sometimes we found archive of a mission and a particular time, sometimes we didn't. And I'd probably adjusted the storytelling to major it around sometimes a piece of great archive. Like we knew we wanted in pilot school, we knew we wanted when they'd done a role swap, the kind of this ridiculous 1950s video about men turning up as pilots, and Eileen and Pat, her husband, did a role swap where they kind of probably made fun of it. And I knew we needed to the point where I don't even know if I could have made the film if Eileen hadn't been able to find it. And she did, through someone else who was at the school who'd kept a copy, Then she herself had kept all of this personal archive. So you'll often hear Pat, her husband, behind the camera with a camcorder, covering all of this from the family point of view and coming in. And so we transferred, this is with the producer, Natasha Dack, reams and reams of tapes, watching, and the editor, James Gold, watching them and working out which bits we could pull out that kind of made the story resonant. And then NASA themselves gave all the astronauts camcorders at the time that Eileen was there. So There was lots of behind the scenes footage. Again, she'd kept all these tapes, and some of the sort of skill of making this is you just want to find those resonant moments. It just makes it feel so human and real, and you're really behind the scenes in this journey. And then that's combined with archive researchers getting some of those amazing footage you see of the launches, some of that shot on film, and just mixing all these different medias together to make that kind of rich portrait that you would see. That's what I try to do as a filmmaker, is you just want to really work out all the different strands.
Yeah, and there's some real tension in the archive footage, and just in terms of as the shuttle is taking off, and especially in light of what had happened before and the different close calls that Commander Collins had over the course of her career. It's pretty amazing stuff. And
story like that, you have to make sure is you have to be ruthlessly focused on the details of the drama in space and out of space that that gripped you about the story. You have to make sure you get all the perspectives you can on that. You don't want to resolve things for an audience. You want to leave them thinking about it all, and the grand mission that is being human, what we're about, really. I guess I'm always trying to make films that work out what makes us tick. And so this was about what made Eileen an astronaut tick, but it was also a film about all of us.
I want to let our listeners know that the film Spacewoman is opening in New York City at the Quad Cinema, which sounds like that's probably where you are right now in New York City. It's also opening right down the street from where I'm sitting in Laguna Beach, and also in Berkeley, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Sebastopol, California, one of my favorite towns in the whole world, and all across the country. So for people who are interested, they can go to
Spacewoman.film, and there's all the dates there. You can look online. There's quite a lot of reviews. The New York Times gave it the Critics' Choice, which we're really pleased about. So it's a film full of drama and emotion. And Eileen and her family were very generous in really just being incredibly frank and opening up their journey. And I think that's, quite special to witness. So, over the next couple of months, it's in lots of theatres over the States. So you can look on spacewoman.film to find those.
Eileen, Commander Collins, I want to also, that's because Hannah just mentioned your wonderful husband, Pat, and it's great to watch the partnership between you, the almost love at first sight that is part of your story. Just a terrific partnership that we get a chance to get to know a little bit about. So let's talk a little bit about your wonderful husband, Pat.
Well, we met in the Air Force way back in 1983. Well, we were both flying cargo aircraft for the Air Force, the C-141. Our first date was right after we met in the squadron, and he came down the hallway after meeting me. He followed me down the hall and asked me out for dinner. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I just met you 5 minutes ago. What's going on? And then we said, okay, we have dinner at 6:00. And he showed up like an hour late. And I said, this is not going to work. But I went out to dinner with him anyway. And the next day, I went on a 2-week trip around the world. So from the beginning, we thought it just wasn't going to work. But being two pilots in the Air Force, it's in the military, you get deployed a lot. And it's, I would say in the first year together, we might have seen each other a third of the time because we were always out on the road. But it worked out. I think we both transferred to the Air Force Academy. He became the golf coach and I was teaching math in the classroom, calculus and linear algebra and aeronautical engineering to the cadets. And we got married a year later, and that was 38 years ago. And we're still married. We got 2 great kids, and our kids are an integral part of our life. They were in the film Spacewoman, especially my daughter, who really adds a really dramatic touch to the film. And in fact, some people think that she becomes like the protagonist with her journey from seeing this terrible accident happen in the space shuttle when she was 7 years old, and her mom is going up on the next flight as commander. And she was 9 years old when I flew that flight, and how hard it was on her, as well as the other children of the other astronauts on my crew. And the things that we did to, kind of get them to understand the importance of space flight and the fact that we knew we were going to be okay. I wouldn't fly the mission if I thought it was going to be unsafe. And all the things that we did to make the space shuttle fly safer, they still worried. And so I think the interviews that Hannah did with my daughter add just such an incredible human touch to to the film. And I had 3 people come up to me in the like film festivals that we've shown the film in already, come up to me and say, I cried through the whole thing. I think because of the way the human emotion is mixed in with the space shuttle missions. And, I had one young woman come up to me and say, that movie changed my life.
Wow.
So there are several people, I think, that really, their life experiences, they, can, I want to say, compare to things that they see in Spacewoman, but they were positive. They're not sad. They're very positive responses. And you can look at the glowing reviews that Hannah and her team have gotten on this film and various places online. It's really heartwarming to see that all the work that we put into the film is making a difference in people's lives.
Well, Commander Collins, the mission continues, if you will, in that way, and to spread the word of challenging yourself, reaching for the stars, and for your bravery, and to you and your husband for your service. Thank you very much for all of that. Again, the film is called Spacewoman. It is out today, March 20th. Be looking for it if you're in New York City. You happen to hear the sound of our voices there and beyond. It will be playing all across the country for, it looks like, a fairly long run here. So congratulations on that. Spacewoman.film. And to both of you, thank you so very much for your time and for your work here. We've been speaking with Hannah Berryman, the director, as well as the subject of the film, Commander Eileen Collins. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.